It's designed to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but this November, voters could end the state's landmark carbon cap and invest program.
If 2117 passes, the price of gas relative to other states will go down because we're putting a 25 to 50 cent tax on it.
But there's nothing in this initiative that does anything. It doesn't reduce anything. It only slashes the budget and increases pollution.
That's next on Seattle University Conversations. Now your host, Joni Balter.
Good afternoon. Big welcome to Seattle University's Conversations program. Today we present a conversational debate on Initiative 2117, appearing on the November ballot. This measure would prohibit carbon tax credit trading and repeal Washington's carbon cap and invest program. With us today, I gotta say, we have the best possible spokespeople for this, Brian Heywood, sponsor of Initiative 2117, and former state senator Reuven Carlyle, author of the Climate Commitment Act that this initiative would undo. Seated next to me is Seattle University senior Sophia Hampton, double major in environmental studies and public affairs, and interviewer with me on today's program. We are planning a high-level discussion today, so we're asking folks to withhold applause until the very end. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Sophia. Brian Heywood, we're gonna start with you. You're the protagonist in this story in some ways. Why did you file this initiative, and why undo years of work by popularly elected lawmakers?
I think there's two big things on this. First of all, it was sold under false premises. The governor came out and said this is going to cost pennies, might even save you money. So the first premise was that at no cost to the consumer, we can do this magical thing. And then the second piece, I think, is that it was, and I'm sure Mr. Carlyle can speak more about it, but it seems that it was designed in a way that there's no accountability for the way that the money is spent. So you collect, already we've collected $2 billion off the backs of commuters, and there is no accountability built into the system for how that money actually gets spent and whether or not it's having the impact on reducing carbon that the promise of the program was. So I think it's the two things, that there was, it's not going to cost you anything, don't worry. And by the way, we're going to do all these wonderful things that we can't track.
Thank you. Senator Carlyle, why do we need this cap and trade program if it is contributing to higher gas prices?
Well, thank you so much, Sophia, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here. I hope the students are fired up to be here as well. You know, on behalf of a coalition of over 500 organizations, from the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce to most of the tribes of our state, to Amazon and BP and Microsoft and all of the labor unions of our state and state PTA, so many organizations. I'm really pleased to be here tonight to really talk in a deep way about this initiative. And you know, the thing about Initiative 2117 is that it's designed, it says, to lower gas prices. The truth is there's not one word, there's not one sentence, there's not one provision of the initiative that actually lowers gas prices at all in any way. And what it does do is it eliminates a cap on pollution. And that cap is real. We have 110 large emitters that emit more than 25,000 metric tons. And so the cap on emissions is good policy, it works. It's an evidence-based global best practice from around the world. And super excited to talk about all the data that proves. But ultimately, not only does it eliminate the cap on emissions, but it institutes a new policy that says the state of Washington can't ask any polluters to contribute toward their pollution. And then finally, it blows a hole of $5.4 billion into our transportation system. And that pays for new ferries, for wildfire prevention, for public health, for free transit for youth, and all kinds of other investments. So I'm really proud to be here to ask you to vote no on Initiative 2117 on behalf of the broadest coalition that's ever been assembled on behalf of opposition of an initiative in the state of Washington.
Thank you. Sticking with you, currently, the cap and trade program only applies to our state. And in a global context, Washington is contributing minimally to carbon emissions. In the grand scheme of things, why is such a localized effort worthwhile?
First of all, it's a great question because, of course, climate change affects all of us, and I think we can all think with a deep sense of humility about what the folks of Florida are going through right now. And there's no question that that hurricane was impacted by climate change in terms of the warming of the ocean. You know, ultimately, as a smaller state, we have designed this legislation from the very beginning to link with California and Quebec and other jurisdictions. When we combine our efforts, we would be the 4th largest economy in the world. So it does have an effect. But what we have in Washington is we have the luxury of going second. We learned from 10 years of Quebec and California's program. We learned from Europe, the strongest program in the world as well. We learned the lessons, the data, 10 years of learning. And what we learned from that is that a strong cap on emissions works. There was an amazing report this summer in the journal Nature, and they did an analysis of cap and invest, and they found that it's the single most effective climate policy in the world. It works. The data is overwhelming. So it matters for us to show the pathway for provinces around the world like Quebec and states around the country. The state of New York and Maryland are formally examining whether or not to join our efforts in Washington state.
Mr. Heywood, this initiative does several things. I'm wondering, and in the drafting of this, why didn't you just try to kill the new cap and invest program that you find objectionable? Your initiative, and the state senator just referred to that, also prohibits any similar carbon trading solutions in the near future. Did you go too far? Do you kind of wish that you didn't include that prohibition?
Not even for a minute. What they found, so Mr. Carlyle talks about how they learned things in the 10 years. And I think one of the most important learnings that they've applied in this state is that when you do a tax, a regressive tax on commuters, through this, but you mask it as a cap and trade, the commuter doesn't pay it directly, they pay it indirectly. And they don't have a choice. But what the state governments learned is that the price of gasoline and driving behavior is very inelastic. And so the states can collect an enormous amount of money before behavior actually changes. So so even this year, you call it a cap, but really all they did is made it expensive to use it. They didn't shut down or reduce the amount of carbon. In future years, as they begin to shrink those number of credits, it doesn't mean that there will be a reduction. It means that the price will go up. So this is a great way to make money. And I think what we are focusing on is this program is a money maker. It's fantastic. If that's your goal, if the government wants to take money from citizens, it's incredibly efficient. But if what they're really trying to do is fix the environment, if there's real credible concerns about reducing carbon, it doesn't do that, and they don't measure it. And so our objective here was take this thing down, and if it's really time sensitive, anytime we waste playing this game of grabbing money from commuters but not really having something impactful that makes a meaningful change, we're wasting time towards something that is, by their own standard, is much more important than the importance they're giving to it.
Picking up on some of that, Reuven, Washington State has a responsibility to ensure the public that they are paying for something that produces results. Without sufficient data about reduced emissions thus far, are we almost virtue signaling by ushering in higher gas prices for a program that may or may not actually reduce emissions?
Actually, there was an amazing report in the scientific journal Science this summer that did a meta-analysis of all of the economic studies in the world about a cap on pollution. And it found that they reduce emissions by about 15%. They work. That's a peer-reviewed, academically valid, evidence-based proof. Unlike 2117, which has absolutely unequivocally no guarantee whatsoever that it's going to reduce emissions, but it will blow a hole in our transportation budget. So ultimately, we're at a tipping point of time. This program does work. It's 19 months old. The data was delayed a little bit because our good friend, the previous president of the United States, delayed the federal data for a couple of years, and so we're playing catch up. The last data that we have is 2019. It's true. We'll have the data from 2022 soon. It does take long.
When, actually?
We all expect it to be soon. But I will say that on the issue of accountability, there's actually in the law, it's a 90-page bill, I acknowledge that, it's a lot of details, and there's hundreds of pages of Washington Administrative Code which implements the law. Extremely detailed accountability and transparency requirements that every program that receives funding from the investments has to prove its impact on emissions. It's in the law, it's in the administrative code. The program is 19 months old. It does take time. Some of the dollars are just beginning to get out the door. You cannot expect 110 large emitters. Let's just remind ourselves, Ash Grove Cement, the largest emitter in the city of Seattle, Nucor Steel, these are major industrial players that are emitting millions of metric tons. Ultimately, shifting to a lower carbon economy is possible. And we can grow jobs, grow quality of life, grow our economy with a lighter touch on the earth. And that's what this program has proven. But it does take time. And it's moving forward. The global data is unequivocal. The state data is right behind it.
Mr. Heywood, young voters are acutely aware of the high cost of living. At the same time, many of us are deeply concerned about the likelihood that we will not have a livable, let alone a financially prosperous future. Why would young people vote for an initiative that significantly narrows the possibility for positive climate action?
It doesn't do this, the latter. It doesn't significantly narrow anything. What I think we should do is they should vote yes. If they really care about the environment, they should vote yes on 2117. Get rid of this very flawed politician's dream grift and do something that's meaningful, that actually works and can be measured. And if I can give an example, there's recently the Department of Ecology did a bunch of methane capture grants. But if you read the grant criteria, being able to actually measure how much methane is removed is not one of the conditions for how they're giving out the grants. So there's this complete, it's pretending, and as I listen to Mr. Carlyle, I hear these beautiful, stated political promises that sound like what goes on in this state. Politicians come in, it's not going to cost you anything, it's going to do these magical things in the future. 2117 doesn't say it's going to, as he said, we're making no claim that we're going to reduce carbon with 2117. What we're going to reduce is that student who's paying a whole lot of money just to get back and forth. We're going to reduce the cost to them. He keeps saying, well, this doesn't guarantee that it'll reduce the cost. I promise you, and I'm willing to make a wager with you, if 2117 passes, the price of gas relative to other states will go down because we're putting a 25 to 50 cent tax on it. And the other promise I can also make you is that if 2117 doesn't pass, he knows this is true because he designed it that way. The price of gas will go up. By their own calculations, it's going to go up to over $1 a gallon by the time this thing is through. It's designed for the price to go up. So if you're a student and you're barely making it, you should vote yes on 2117, get rid of this, and if you really care about the environment, become part of the conversation of what could really work that doesn't destroy the economy in the meantime.
Thank you. And as I just alluded to, young voters tend to believe in human-caused climate change. Do you? Yes or no?
I think anybody that says humans don't have an impact on the environment is a fool.
Thank you. And with that being said, I think it's hard to deny that we've seen an increase in the frequency and intensity of devastating natural disasters in recent years. Thinking about Florida right now, thinking about wildfires, heat waves, floods, just to name a few. If not the government, who has a responsibility to respond to this increase in events and their underlying cause?
Well, Mr. Carlyle stated at the front that these Florida hurricanes are somehow part of global warming, and I don't think there's any conclusive evidence of that whatsoever. This is just an assertion that's made to scare people. I think that you can laugh all you want, but you can make these assertions, it doesn't make them true. Do we have a responsibility? If the question is, do we as individuals have a responsibility to take care of and the stewardship of the environment? Absolutely. On an individual level, absolutely, we should be doing things to make a difference.
But not the government.
The government can, and it did in the 70s. It had a very responsible program. And it's unlike what's going on today. In the 70s, we had serious pollution problems with carbon monoxide and with a lot of different chemicals that were being released into the environment that were very, very unhealthy. And they had a cap and trade program that actually worked because it was a real market program. What we've got in this state is something that says, here's this cap and trade, and then instead of letting the market sort of fix it, this is a gun to the head market solution. And then we said, and then you're going to have to, Jay Inslee said he wanted all the cars that were bought by the state were supposed to be, or 50% by 2021 were supposed to be EVs. I think now it's maybe at 20%. He hasn't been able to deliver on it. But he's doing the mandates that aren't necessarily, they're not workable in a way that the market's going to function. If we get rid of all the energy that we're talking about now, this state has no way to function. We don't have anything to back up. And we're not talking about natural gas today, but that's another one that they've been talking about getting rid of. If you get rid of natural gas, and I'd be curious if Mr. Carlyle, what he thinks about the dams. Do you think that we should get rid of the dams as a source of electricity? I personally don't, but I think if we go in this direction, we don't have a plan in place to deal with society that runs out of electricity and energy.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess I'm struck by the term grifter. Mr. Heywood used the term grifter of the beneficiaries of some of the investments of money. And he said in a recent King 5 interview the other day that our tribal elders are grifters for receiving, well, that was my understanding of the.
No, I did never call the tribal elders grifter. I never called them.
The tribes were grifters.
No, I did not call the tribes grifters. I called Jay Inslee a grifter.
Okay, well, all right. My understanding is, I apologize, but I do think that the question of whether beneficiaries of the investment of this pollution resources are grifters is an important question, because the tribes are deeply invested in using this money for salmon restoration. We have an $8 billion obligation to clear the fish culverts to restore salmon. We are using Climate Commitment Act money for 1 million school kids in 295 school districts to get new heating and cooling systems, for universities to get new heating and cooling systems, for young people, 18 and younger, to ride any bus, any ferry, and any train free. That's all funded with CCA money. And people who live in timber country in our state, wildfire prevention, those dollars are all coming from this pollution source. So the idea that the program's not accountable, that it's not working, and that the beneficiaries of the investment of the money are grifters is jolting. And I think that it's important to realize we are a constitutional republic. We elect people to write budgets, to study, to pass legislation. The people have the ultimate power under our constitutional system, which is beautiful. But there is something very powerful to passing legislation and to caring about it and reading it and writing budgets. And what we learned today is that the appropriation process of how to spend these dollars is 100% accountable and it's 100% public. Every amendment, every provision, every text, every email. When I was in the Senate, my entire financial disclosure forms, the governor's financial disclosure forms, every legislator, every text, it's all public. We had 2 years of hearings, we had a dozen sessions of public hearings, amendments, hundreds of people testifying. I understand and appreciate that Mr. Heywood thinks that our constitutional republic was tricked by one comment. But we have a representative democracy, and this legislation, the Environmental Defense Fund, the premier environmental organization in the world, called this legislation, quote, the gold standard of climate policy, unquote. This policy works because it asks 110 large emitters contribute their proportional share of their own emissions and reinvest those dollars into more decarbonization.
Well, so you mentioned that you represented 500 companies and corporations and a lot of people that are probably getting money from this. I represent over 460,000 individuals who signed their name on the initiative because they were hurting financially because of the impact this has had on their home burden. And I'll tell you, when I go out, we do these gas station events where we go out and we reduce the cost of gas to the national average. And we do it in part to gather attention. But when I go there, I get a chance to talk to people that have come up. And there's people that say, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote for your initiative, but I'm here because I'm hurting and I need cheaper gas. Our initiative was the third highest signature gathering total in the entire history of the state. And it was very easy to gather signatures.
This particular one for 2117
this one,
or
yeah,
for the other one?
Yes.
Okay.
The 2117. We had about 460,000. That's about the third highest ever. The natural gas was number 2. So we've got people that are hurting, and one of the questions I guess I would have back to Mr. Carlyle is, if you knew, or maybe you didn't, but if you knew that this wasn't going to just cost pennies, you knew the cost was going to go up, why did you let Jay Inslee sort of go out there and promote this? If all this discussion had been had, it means you should have known that it was going to cost. It wasn't going to be free as he had suggested. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you say, no, that's not true. It's going to be, it's going to cost money. And if that's the case, then let's have that honest debate with everybody.
Well, that actually takes a question I was about to ask, so I'm going to reframe it ever so slightly. Governor Inslee clearly did understate the cost of gas prices under the Climate Commitment Act. Mere pennies, he said. This clip has been watched by everybody everywhere a couple times. Estimates show the actual amount is around 22, 46, maybe 50 cents per gallon. Would it be easier now if you or he just said, hey, we estimated wrong, but the program is still worth it for all of these reasons, or something like that?
Today, literally today, the average gas price in Washington is $3.96.
Yes.
In 2022, before the legislation was implemented, before it was on the books, it was $5.29. So it's $1.33 cheaper today than it was when the program was started. How can it be responsible in the cause of a 50 cent to $1 gas tax?
I do want to know that, because
it makes no sense.
It came down on its own. It came down on its own at over $1.
It makes no sense. So I would also say that global crude prices, pipeline issues, war in Ukraine, OPEC, Venezuela, all of these issues, along with retail issues, are the real drivers of the price of gasoline. In Wapato, Washington, the price of a gallon of gasoline is $3.10. Across the street at the 76 station, it's $4.75. It's a marketplace. The role of the Climate Commitment Act is not causational, it's correlational, just like any market in the world. That's the truth. We have a global war happening. And, there is nobody more committed to climate action and climate impact and job growth and quality of life and our grandchildren's grandchildren than Jay Inslee. And he has been a moral authority, thought leader on the issue of climate. And ultimately, to take one 5-second clip from one press conference versus
But why not do what I suggested?
dozens.
Why not just say,
Sure.
got the number wrong? How about
we as a constitutional republic did not. We had dozens of hearings, dozens of meetings, hundreds of people testified. We had amendments. We have language. We talked about this in committee. We talked about it on the floor. I got up on the Senate floor and made this speech and talked about impact and benefits. It's just not true that 8 million people, one of the smartest, most educated states in the country, were hoodwinked by one 5-second clip.
So there's squid ink all over what just happened. Number one, he said prices have gone down because of this and that. What really matters is not whether prices in the absolute have gone down, but in the relative. We are over $1 higher than any other state. And the reason for that is we have a gas tax that costs about 49 cents. And then the difference between us and the others is anywhere from 26 to 50 cents greater than the average. Our cost of gas here is much higher and even to bordering states like Idaho and Oregon, and you can contribute it directly to the 49-cent direct sales gas tax, and the rest is the CCA. So to pretend to sort of say, oh, it's war in Ukraine. Yes, the war in Ukraine absolutely increases the price of gas. Absolutely, no doubt. So do a bunch of other things. But it's the differential that matters, because our state, with huge ports, with great access, should not ever have been having higher gas prices than Hawaii, that has to import all of its gas. It matters on a relative basis, number one. Number two, he still didn't answer the question, and I think you asked it to him twice. If you knew, why didn't you say it? And his question, and his answer to me was,
I didn't actually say that. I said,
well, why don't you say it now?
From what you know now, why not say that was an?
I'd still like to hear the answer to that. Do you believe that it increased the cost at all, or do you reject that it cost any increase in the price? You say it's correlationary, not causational. So you reject completely that it caused any increase in the price of gas?
I reject completely that we have any disclosure of the difference between the wholesale and the retail rate. The cost of allowances from the Climate Commitment Act are not reflected in any technically viable way at the pump. There's no way to know whether a supplier is charging X amount or Y amount. Why is the price of gasoline $3.10 at a 76 station in Wapato and $4.75 in Seattle? And you say the issue of relative. So relative, Washington to national, I appreciate you raising that. The relative price has gone down at 71 cents in the last few years. It's just unbelievable. It's gone down. So if you believe it's causational, then the Climate Commitment Act has actually lowered. So it's not possible to know the exact amount. I just don't accept that it's possible to know the exact amount. I would note also, though, that yesterday, Senator John Braun, the state Republican leader of the state Senate, fabulous, high-integrity guy, said basically that once the 2117 passes, then the Republicans will be proposing a gas tax. So it seems to me that the proponents of 2117 are not actually against increasing gas prices. They're actually just against state climate action and a cap on pollution.
Gas taxes have other rules on them. Can you explain that? Go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, okay, so they're limited to, or they're used very heavily for roads and bridges, right?
That's right. And so the question is, if 2117 goes away, what do we do about the $5.4 billion cut to new ferries, wildfire prevention, free transit for youth, and all of those other investments that are so critical? Think about a pot. You have a small pot, and you've got two sources of water that fill up that pot. 2/3 of it comes from the gas tax, and 1/3 comes from the cap and invest program. If you turn off that cap and invest, you get less water and you have more dependency on gas prices, just as cars are getting more efficient and there's less gas tax modeling. Every state in the nation and every jurisdiction in the world is looking for ways to creatively explore how to fund a high-quality transportation system. The Environmental Defense Fund calls this policy the gold standard of state climate policy, because we reinvest those dollars in the communities, in disproportionately impacted communities, in tribes, in low-income communities. We are using those dollars on behalf of the public for the public good. And yes, we have to be thoughtful about that. And yes, there is accountability. There is transparency. But the era of massive gas tax being the only source of funds is unsustainable in the world we live in.
So I don't support a gas tax. And if John Braun brings a gas tax, I may do an initiative to get rid of the gas tax, right? This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. So when he says the backers of it, that's absolutely not true. Let me go back to something you said earlier, which is the grifting thing. I never called anybody that takes money from the state, I don't call them grifters. Grifters are the state employees and the not the state employees, let's say the titans of Olympia who are taking the money from commuters and then passing it out as political favors. That's the grift. I don't blame the tribes for taking the money. They're smart to take the money. I don't blame anyone that takes the $200 check that Janesley is bribing everybody with now. Take the check and then vote yes on 2117. That's not a grift.
Okay.
Inslee's the grift.
Whoops. I think I won. Are you almost finished? Okay.
Go ahead. No.
Brian, if not this program, what? The Seattle Times editorial page, which opposed your initiative, dinged you pretty badly for not having an alternative solution. What is the alternative? A heavy-handed
I think something that works,
system?
first of all, something that works.
Hang on a second.
So let's get together. He says we spent two years crafting this thing. I don't think you talked to anybody that was going to be impacted by it. You went out and you did this program and you said, okay, gasoline companies, you big fuel companies, this is the conversation that seems to have gone on. If you don't play ball with us on the way that we're going to do this, if you don't play ball, but you can do this cap and trade, which isn't going to cost you anything. You can pass it on to the commuter, essentially. So there's no cost to you. If you do that and play ball with us, then we don't do anything that hurts you worse. If you don't do that, we're going to do something much more draconian. And so the gas companies come on board with it. BP's on board with it. It should be make everybody in this room suspicious. Why is BP on board with this thing? So if we want to do something that's meaningful and that matters, I think that you need to get not only the 500 organizations that are going to get money from the CCA. I think you need to talk to the 500,000 people who signed the initiative, who are hurt by this every single day. So bring that voice in, and then let's talk about programs that work. And there's programs that work that aren't such a regressive tax.
So I can understand getting a little agitated about having 500 of the premier organizations in the state opposed to your entity.
That doesn't upset me. They're all on the take.
So the state PTA, the Washington State Medical Association, the editorial boards of Vancouver and Everett and Seattle and elsewhere, the public health officials, I'm struggling to understand why and how they're all on the take. We are facing a challenge in this state. And you know, a couple of weeks ago, Dan Evans passed away. He was 98 years old. He was a 3-term Republican governor and U.S. senator in the state. In 2008, he endorsed me in my campaign for State House. I was the first Democrat he ever endorsed. He created the Department of Ecology. He was a leader, a moral authority thought leader in environment and climate work. He believed it to his core. Mr. Heywood is a 2024 type of Republican, not a traditional Washington State Republican. And I think we're at a moment in time to ask ourselves, are we going to invest in our quality of life, in our jobs, in our future? Are we going to invest in free transit? Are we going to invest in wildfire prevention? Are we going to take a moral stand for a better quality of life? Or are we going to step back and say state governments, states have no role? Our job is to do nothing. I don't think that's what the people of Washington want. We are facing an affordability challenge in this country and around the world. There's no question about that. But there's nothing in this initiative that does anything. It doesn't reduce anything. It only slashes the budget and increases pollution. And when he says when she asks if there's an alternative, his policy, the 2117, is the alternative. It sets state law that says that polluters cannot be asked to contribute to their own pollution. That's all we're asking. We're not asking those emitters to do more than their fair share. We're just asking them to do their fair share. And that's what our economy is about. That's why Amazon and Microsoft, why is BP supporting this and joining the broadest coalition in state history? Because they participate in this program in Europe and California, and they know how it works. They invested $280 million to invest in their own refinery up in Cherry Point, the largest emitter in Washington state, because they know that if they do that, they make money in the long term by decarbonizing.
And getting
it's
money
business.
From the state.
It's just business. They made a decision. And to ask yourself why the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce, representing hundreds and hundreds of small businesses, why is the business community, the labor community, the environment community, the public health community, and virtually every editorial and everyone else opposed to this? Maybe because blowing up the cap on emissions increases emissions, blows up our budget, and sets in motion the wrong direction for the state.
All right, this question is again for Senator Carlyle. You're no longer in the legislature, but as we've mentioned, there's over 400,000 signatures for this initiative, and it's clear that many Washington voters aren't satisfied with the Climate Commitment Act as they understand it. If the initiative fails and the law continues, how should lawmakers respond to this legitimate frustration? For example, are there any amendments lawmakers could or should enact?
Thank you, Sophia. It's a great question. I think it's a spot-on question, and I guess I would remind folks that the state of Washington has passed a law. It is state law that we will decarbonize. The Climate Commitment Act doesn't repeal that. 2117 doesn't repeal the state of Washington's legal statutory obligation to decarbonize by 2050. We've embraced the letter and the spirit of the Paris Agreement, net zero and science. And so that obligation continues. We have to continue to decarbonize. The question is whether we will continue to do that, to grow our economy and to decarbonize our economy in a market-based way that the Environmental Defense Fund says is the gold standard of state climate policy and is well crafted, or whether we're going to have a top-down command and control regulated model. So the question of what the legislature might do is an open question, of course. But I prefer market-based systems rather than a command and control mandate that those 110 large emitters have to simply decarbonize regardless of cost. Those studies that I cited prove that a carbon pricing system of a cap and invest is the most economically efficient, most affordable way to decarbonize. It works, it's proven. So maybe there'll be amendments around the edges, but I think there's unlikely to be an additional gas tax the way the Republican proponents are proposing.
All right, Mr. Heywood, gas prices, as we've talked about, are influenced by many factors well outside of our state, in our nation. The average Washington gas price has hovered above the national average for the past 2 years, long before the Climate Commitment Act was passed. Considering all this, how do you know this initiative will result in a meaningful and lasting decrease in prices?
I'm not claiming it's a lasting. What I'm claiming is that there is in the price of gas in Washington state right now for the last 2 years, it's been anywhere from 26 to 50 cents per gallon. And again, we're playing disingenuous here. Because this has been implemented in other places, they know this. They almost calculate it. The price of gasoline is about a penny per gallon per dollar per carbon credit. The carbon credits in this state have traded between about $26 per ton to $50 per ton, $60 at the top. And our prices have correlated with that at the pennies per gallon. So we've been about 26 to 50 pennies per gallon. It correlates, and it's done this over and over in every other state. He knows this is the case. You won't tell everybody, even your last answer, what is this? And you said something that was sort of squidding that nobody in the room understood. I don't even understand what you're talking about. That there was some kind of correlation. I don't know what you're even talking about with that. You said some correlation number, and I went, what in the world are you talking about? The numbers are clear, and anybody that drives a car knows that the price has gone up. So so if you just look at economics, if we take this burden that we have on the carbon credits program, where these guys have to buy these credits that they're then passing on, if that goes away, just the supply and demand of it will force that price increase will disappear. Will it go? It doesn't mean suddenly our gas gets cheap. It means that premium that we pay in Washington state will go away.
Immediately?
No, it goes through the market, but within 3 months, yes, absolutely.
There's absolutely no data to suggest that. I would remind us that the gas price average today is $3.96, and 2 years ago it was $5.29. And all I'm saying is that what we know is that what is absolutely guaranteed, and what we know is that if we eliminate the cap on pollution, that the 100 largest emitters will increase pollution. We know that it will lead to more pollution. And then we also know that we will be prohibited from asking any emitters or polluters to contribute toward their own emissions. And we also know that we will blow a $5.4 billion hole in our transportation system. And so that's what we know. That is assured. Will there be a reduction in gas prices if 2117? Absolutely no assurance, no guarantee. We don't know. We do know that it will do enormous damage, which is why the broadest coalition in Washington state history is standing against this reckless and poorly written initiative.
So can you guarantee that if 2117 doesn't pass, can you guarantee that the price of the carbon, which is designed to go up, these credits, fewer and fewer credits every year, can you guarantee that the price will not go up to like $1 a gallon, like is in your own documents as the Senate and the House were debating this? It was projected that it would go up to at least $1 per gallon. So is your position that there's absolutely, it will not go up because of this? Our cost is not going to go up? Or can you guarantee there'll be no impact?
I can only guarantee you one thing, is that if you eliminate the cap on pollution, that pollution will go up. I can guarantee you that.
I can guarantee you that if we get rid of this flawed grifting program, the price of gas will go down. And it won't go up in future years because of this program.
But you also didn't state what the alternative is. What's the clear alternative?
What's the clear alternative?
To getting rid of it.
I think we need to sit down and do something that works. And this is not it.
What does that mean?
Well, what does this do? It does programs. It does. Whatcom County gets this huge grant. $2 million of it goes to hiring new people, okay? This was supposed to be helping the salmon. $2 million of it goes to hiring new people. $900,000 of it goes to making good relationships with Canada. And then $1 million of it was to do a study to see how they could spend the money. Not one single penny goes to fixing the salmon issue at all. And there's no accountability. He says there's rules. If you look in the bill itself, it says that the reports have to be made. But when I was talking with Joe Fitzgibbons and challenging him on this thing, his response was, yeah, it would be nice if we had a way to track all this, but we don't. They do not have a way to measure the results of any of the money that they're spending. This is a huge grift, and it sounds nice because a politician is making all these beautiful promises. Hey, it's not going to cost anything, and the skies are going to be blue, and everything's going to be wonderful. But it's all fake promises with money that they can then go around and pay to political constituents.
You know, I just have to respond to a couple things. First of all, I'm from Whatcom County. I grew up in Bellingham. And I will say that one of the most important elements of our entire energy policy is our relationship with Canada relative to our hydro, relative to our infrastructure. And the J-pod and the L-pod orcas are starving to death. They eat Chinook salmon. The largest riverbeds for spawning Chinook salmon are up in Whatcom County. To say that that's a program that doesn't work is just wrong. And secondly, on the issue of accountability, I just have to read you chapter 173044 of the Washington Administrative Code and the RCW. Just to be really clear, the law directs the state agencies to implement 2 rules within their rulemaking. One is for the emission reportings, all of the details of the emitters, and 2 is all of the beneficiaries of the recipients of the program. There is absolute transparency, absolute public disclosure, and absolute accountability on this program. It's 19 months old. It does take time to get it operational, and it's underway.
So as far as, if I can, and let me respond to this if that's all right. Because number one, I'm not, he throws things out and pretends like I said it. I'm saying that there was this grant that went to Whatcom County that's a new grant that has no money whatsoever going towards the salmon. It's all going towards bureaucracy. It's that kind of waste that I'm talking about. When it comes to what you're talking about with the accountability, in the law it says you're supposed to do reports. Sure, but Jay Inslee, by law, the Department of Ecology is supposed to be updating our carbon data. He threw it out. Somehow this is Trump's fault. What? There's not even a Trump supporter within 60 miles of this city and of Olympia. And the Democrat Party has been in control for 40 years. You're saying that somehow the fact that our own Department of Ecology that is run by and appointed by Jay Inslee, that somehow they, because of Trump, are not able to put information out?
The data you're asking for is federal EPA data. There was a delay. And
So so that's the
Okay.
excuse on this. If we can't track it, we can't even get carbon data that without getting the federal data. Then we don't have a tracking mechanism.
can track
I
That's
think we're
my
gonna move
point.
on.
Hey,
We
folks,
can
we'd
track
like to
it, and
talk
we have
about
it.
some of the details of the campaign so far, because they've been pretty interesting as well. And Sophia has a question.
Yeah, we're gonna move on. So, Senator Carlyle, what about the matter of the $200 electricity credits from the CCA issued to low and moderate income customers by September 15th before the election? Does the timing of this amount to some sort of campaign misconduct?
You know, each year the legislature meets in the first couple of months of the year, January through March or January through May. Historically, without question, programs take effect in the fall. This is 100% consistent with every other program that's ever been implemented. The bill passed, they give the agency 6 months to implement, and they implement in the fall. It's exactly on the same timeline as every other program in state government, regardless of whether it has anything to do with climate, transportation, you name it. So it's absolutely consistent with all of the timing of the mechanics of state government.
And so a few questions for you, Brian Heywood, about the campaign. You do, and you mentioned this, spot takeovers of gas stations, gas price rollbacks. I think you've done 18 last time I checked. But anyway, you offer low gas prices. You promote the initiative at the same time. I do understand that gas buyers don't have to say, I'll have the gas and I promise to vote for your initiative. But still, is this also a form of election misbehavior?
Absolutely not. We're drawing attention to the discrepancy between the price of gas in Washington state and in other states. I think it's much more shameful when you've put a gun to people's heads, you've taken money from them through this coercive hidden tax, and then you go back and you say, oh, here's $200. And in fact, I think one of the things you didn't mention is that recently there's been a letter that surfaced that was from I don't know if it was the Department of Ecology that was
Wait, I thought we were talking about...
Well, I think this is important because a letter from the state to the utility companies that said, you have to make sure, it's explicitly said, you have to make sure this money gets spent before the voters vote on the initiatives. There's no way that's not tied to it. If someone comes up and says, I hate you, I hate everything you're doing, you're terrible for the environment, please give me the cheap gas, they still get the cheap gas.
But I was asking about, is that sort of another way of...
How so? So tell me, how is it?
Is that another way of sort of leveraging an event like that to not quite buy, because they don't have to agree to vote, but to encourage them to participate in this election?
Every time someone spends money on an advertisement, you're doing something similar to that. Why is this something that would be in any way unethical?
It got to look from folks, as did this Public Disclosure Commission this week fined your group $20,000 with a $10,000 suspension for part of it for not reporting what signature gathering firms paid to sub-vendors and not producing documents in a timely fashion. You mentioned you might do other initiatives. You do a fair amount of initiatives so far here in the last couple of years. Do you need to up your game on our state campaign finance laws?
Well, I would challenge let's go look at what the PDC did, if you really want to get into the detail of that.
Not too thick, but some.
What they basically said was, we said, they asked us if we had any sub-vendors for the people that were gathering signatures. We told them no. They said, we think you do. We said, we don't know of any, and we've asked them and they've told us no. That was our exchange. Then they said, well, we still think that there probably should be, so we're going to fine you $10,000 on that because there should have been. If this is the new standard, then every single campaign in the entire state should be looking through their rear window, because I'm going to file complaints. Every single campaign in the state, if the new standard is that the PDC of its own volition has a feeling that there might be something, if that's the new standard, then every single campaign in the state owes $10,000 or more. So we did not do anything wrong. And what the other thing that it said,
But
if you look very closely,
they fined you. They thought that you did.
But if you look at what they said, there's no misaccounting of any of the money whatsoever. We kept correct books and records. There's no discrepancy or no dispute whatsoever that we filed everything as we were supposed to. This one thing is they're saying you didn't tell us who your sub-vendors were, and we don't know. And so that's the standard. If that's the standard, that even though we don't know who sub-vendors are, we're going to get fined $10,000, then every single campaign in the state is subject to this new law that was created just to go after Let's Go Washington. It was created on
I'm
the
sorry,
spot.
but that
It
I
was
don't really
regulatory creation on the spot.
That's how you view it.
No,
Okay.
Look at it. Look at the
So
law.
folks,
They're not
we're
following
getting
the
a
law.
little tighter on time. You can add something here, but then we're going to go on to just our very few last questions.
Yeah, so Senator Carlyle, farmers were supposed to be protected from higher fuel prices associated with the CCA, but the implementation of that has faced some criticism. How is this being fixed or addressed?
The exemption for farmers was a little clunky. It took a few months to get it right. And the legislature put a $30 million appropriation into a fund to backfill farmers who are inadvertently charged. As a general rule in politics, of course, in Washington State and around the country, most farmers don't pay most taxes. And so we're very comfortable with the structural rulings of how the taxation works within the agriculture community. In this case, there was a glitch. It took a few months to get it figured out, and the legislature has backfilled those dollars and the investment of those monies to make sure that small farmers who are driving on the farm and off the farm, there was clarity on that. So it's fully underway, and actually, credit to the agriculture community. The farmers have been active in participating in the technical analysis of how to get that right. And I think the legislature did a good job in funding that program, and I think they've got that overwhelmingly ironed out.
I think if you went over to Eastern Washington and actually talked to farmers, you'll find a very different story. They're mad. It's a pain in the butt. They have to jump through a bunch of hurdles. They have to do a whole bunch of new extra paperwork to do this. That you can say there was a fix and then it's working smoothly. It didn't take 2 months. It didn't happen until very recently that there's even beginning to be something there. Farmers are not happy with this, and they were promised. First, we were told that there wasn't going to be an impact anyway, and then even though we told I think this spots the lie of this whole issue. There's not going to be any impact. There's no correlation. There's no impact. But farmers, we're going to carve out for you so you don't have to pay anything with this impact that doesn't exist. Which is it? Either there's no impact or we don't need something for the farmers to exempt them from this. I think he speaks his own lie there.
This is for either of you. Voters rejected earlier carbon taxes and fees in 2016 and 2018. Why do either of you think voters feel more strongly one way or the other on this measure? Because it works backwards. In other words, you vote yes and that to keep the climate, you vote no to keep the climate program. Other than that, what has changed?
So we have the broadest, deepest, most extensive coalition in state history asking for a no vote on 2117. And I think it's incredibly impactful. Why? And the reason is that it's good, responsible public policy the way we have it. And the alternative proposed by 2117 is to blow up the cap on emissions and to prohibit any kind of future-related policy and to blow a hole in our budget across the board. So that broad coalition is fundamentally different than those previous efforts. And I think we have entered a new era of people wanting thoughtful, reflective policies. This policy was well vetted. It's thoughtful. No policy is perfect. No one's defending every aspect of every policy by any stretch of the imagination. But you know, there's something magical about this constitutional republic. This system works. Our country we're better than this as a nation. And we are on the right path when we work together. And that's what this coalition is asking you to do, is to vote no and to move forward, to move our state forward and to move our country forward.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but I just have a question. You know, as a student, my econ professor and I were talking about how, from an economic standpoint, when fossil fuels are cheaper than the alternative, and regardless of negative externalities like pollution, industry doesn't have an incentive to move to clean energy. How do you see a multi-sector transition to clean energy playing out without government intervention?
Well, so one, there's a presumption in there that we must get rid of fossil fuels. And I think that there's, this is a whole nother debate for a longer conversation, but I was just out in Eastern Washington. I met with some tractors, and I went to a tractor dealership. They had this big, huge, it's called a quad track. It's an enormous tractor. And what's happened is the The technology for that tractor, it's a diesel tractor, but the technology for it they've got so many, they've developed so many filters and ways of managing the exhaust that the exhaust coming out is cleaner than the air coming in. Now that's sort of amazing. That was the market at work doing technology to correct something. Coal plants in many places have been so reformed that the emissions are really negligible. Clean coal is something that's real. And there's something called clean diesel as well. And I think if you say, well, let's get rid of all these things, if fossil fuels are 100% bad and there's no good in them, that tells me that we're not having an honest conversation. Go to any country that has lack of fossil fuels and you'll see the greatest pollution in the entire world. Fossil fuels help clean things, they help heat, they replace much dirtier fuels in India, places where they're burning buffalo chips essentially. You get a much in the rural villages. Your emissions are much heavier than you are when you begin to get efficient things that are done with fossil fuels. And so I think the answer is going to lie in a reasonable, rational policy that's not driven by ideology. There's this ideology that they're all bad and there can be no good in them. There will be a phase out, and we don't even know where hydrogen, for example, hydrogen fuel is a fairly clean energy source that's not fully developed yet. It could do things that we don't even know, and we haven't messed around with. Microsoft's spending a lot of money looking now at nuclear reactors as a way to sort of deal with all the energy costs of AI. There's going to be a bunch of different solutions if we basically say this one class is all bad and we get rid of it prematurely before we have something to replace it. I think society gets hit, and we have things like this sort of ill thought out climate grift that takes he says we're asking polluters to pay money. No, we're not. We're asking everyday people that are driving to get to work, we're asking them to pay anywhere from $200 to $800 extra a year on their gas tank, and then we're paying more at the grocery store because all those foods get taken on trucks that are having to pay more in gas. And then Puget Sound Energy, we haven't even got to them yet, who dramatically raised their prices of energy. And when they were going to reveal it to the customer, the Attorney General said, no, you can't mention that it was the CCA that caused your fuel prices to go up.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Washington State just won a $1 billion federal grant from the federal government for hydrogen. That was another piece of my legislation, and we won it with state matching dollars from the Climate Commitment Act. So $20 million investment just delivered $1 billion of federal money. We also have $30 million going into nuclear development in Eastern Washington, also funded by this legislation. So thank you for your compliment to our legislation.
That's all we have time for. I am so grateful to Brian Heywood and Reuven Carlyle and Sophia Hampton for this really in-depth conversation, and I want to thank all of you for watching.